Fundamentally, he sees a problem with the trans-historical cosplay commanded by the Mishnah, and not only that, but he calls into question the entire tale of the Exodus itself. From the vantage point of early modern Bohemia, he takes note of the, at best, qualified security and well-being of the Jewish people and dares to ask, did the Exodus really work? How can we, per the Mishnah, identify with this tale of liberation if it did not really take hold? While we were taken out of Pharaoh's enslavement, we were merely transposed from one regime to another. How can we declare that freedom absolute as having truly taken place? And this year, how can we say that this is a feast of freedom when we feel confined, when we are legally confined to our homes? Thankfully, the Maharal provides us with a radical change of perspective. According to him, our thinking was skewed from the outset, since we framed the Exodus as an external change of state, from the tyranny in Egypt to the deferred liberation in Canaan. Rather, the true nature of the Exodus was not historical, nor was it political. It was existential. Pharaoh's oppression was not merely bodily, it seeped down much deeper than that. The Hebrew slaves did not see themselves as being in an unfree condition or situation, but rather they saw themselves as being not free. They were slaves all the way down. Part of the genocidal violence of slavery is to dehumanize its targets, making them see themselves as how their masters see them, merely objects, subhuman, slaves. The Maharal helps us see that the liberation of the Exodus was not an external event, but a flowering within, in which God helped Israel see that we are already fundamentally free, that freedom was something that we deserve and have a right to claim. So, to the Maharal, the freedom of the Exodus was not essentially a historical event, but rather an existential fact that must be realized again and again and again for it to take place. Indeed, this year we can say, what does it mean to say we are a free people? Anu b'nei chorin, when we are not allowed to go outside, when we're supposed to stay home. Another way of framing it is, what kind of inner freedom can we find this year in Pesach at the Seder? If it's a Seder by ourselves, or if it's a Seder with our families, a small family this year. What does it mean to look into the Haggadah, to look into our story, to look into ourselves and say, what internal freedom can I find? The Arizal, famed mystic of 16th century Tzfat, extended this point to all of the Yontifs, every year. Each of the biblical holidays has been as both a historical hook as well as a cyclical agrarian aspect in the agricultural cycle, framing the sacred cycle of the Jewish year. But in the liturgy, each of the holidays also has a thematic component. Passover is referred to as Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. To the Arizal, each Yontif is the recurrence of that principle in the world. Each holiday is its own Rosh Hashanah. Passover, to this perspective, is not primarily the historical anniversary of the Exodus, but rather the cosmic anniversary of the flowering of freedom. The Sfas Emes, a late 19th century Polish Hasidic master, in one of his Passover Divrei Torah, further develops this point, synthesizing it with the Maharal's internalist revolution. He writes, "Once one sees oneself as if one had left, one knows and believes that this enlightenment could only occur through the leaving of Mitzrayim, and it is through this that one is able to see how to truly leave. It is according to one's faith that one too left Egypt, that this is revealed, and one can feel what leaving Mitzrayim today means, having the capacity to leave one's own constraints." To the Sfas Emes, the story of the Exodus is a restaging of a universal experience of liberation, which was initiated in the seminal narrative and then relived each year, again and again and again. Through the mitzvah, we are commanded to perform, retelling that story. What he calls faith is not a kind of propositional belief about the historical event, I believe the Exodus, but rather a request to have faith in it, to believe that it is within us, that it can be accessed and revived in the here and now. And what is it? To leave Mitzrayim. The meaning of the term, as many rabbis point out, is related to the word meitzer, narrowness or straight, perhaps referring to Egypt's position between the Mediterranean, the Nile, and the Red Sea. However, it also described how Pharaoh treated the underclass of Hebrews, constraining them, per the Maharal, making them feel smaller and less than they really were. So the Sfas Emes directs us, commands us to turn inward. The Exodus from Mitzrayim set the precedent for the condition of freedom, to be able to look inside and ask, what is it that is confining and constraining me? What is my personal Mitzrayim? How am I not actualizing the freedom that is essential to me as a Jew, as a human being? Each year, the Sfas Emes tells us we must look at ourselves as if we left Egypt, because in this way, each of us must go through that process year after year. Freedom is not a fact. It has to be actualized and realized. That is the task of Passover. We have real confinement this year. We are confined to our homes. The challenge is a taste in our mouth. We feel it. Pesach's freedom is still real. The question is, how can we dig down inside and find it? What is our freedom within the coronavirus before, God willing, we have freedom from it? All right, well, we've accomplished one element of the Shabbat haGadol sermon. It's long. But traditionally speaking, the sermon for the Shabbos for Pesach is supposed to be about a matter of halacha, Jewish law. So here I will bring up what is, in my opinion, a mitzvah of equal importance as getting rid of all of your chametz. The mitzvah of ma'ot chitin, literally wheat money, or rather, money for matzah. In short, it's a Pesach tax, a donation of money to ensure that each and every member of the community is able to fulfill the mitzvah of having a Seder meal on Pesach. And this year, this mitzvah is more pressing than ever, as so many elders and poor people in our community are in dire financial straits and need immediate and direct help from all of us. We have included a link to the UJA's Global Seder program and also the United Chesed Fund of Toronto. Find them online. They have a Ma'ot Chitin online donation process. Please, please, please see this mitzvah as especially relevant this year. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, in his version of the Shulchan Aruch, writes that this tax extends to every member of the community, even those, like Talmidei Chachamim, normally exempt from such payments because they're on a stipend. The commitment to ensure that everyone has the material conditions necessary to have a real Passover meal is universal and especially pressing this year. So let's return to the Maharal for a moment. In the same essay from which I cited earlier, the Maharal notes the difference between our experience of the Exodus and the God's eye view above. To us, we experience liberation as happening to each of us individually, but God works in universals. God established freedom, and we received it. As a philosophical point, this is quite interesting, since it touches on the problem of the universal and the particular in reference to the divine. But that's a bit far afield and technical for what we're grappling with. If you want to get into the philosophical weeds, go talk to Bernie. However, there is an important point we can take away from this. When we experience something, we see it as happening just to us, but in truth, we are participating in something beyond us. Ma'ot Chitin is the actualization of this realization, that our experience of the wondrous good of freedom is contingent on others' experience as well. Soon, God, please soon, God, may we have the miraculous zechus, the privilege to enjoy the conditions that allow us to go through Mitzrayim, to experience the fullness of what freedom can look like today. However, for us, it is more internal, as we spoke about earlier, and that internal revolution is dependent on the physical and material conditions to be able to enjoy a meal where we enact with our bodies as we luxuriously lean that reawakening of freedom. The things that we're asked to do today, the confinements we're asked for, are themselves actually aspects or elements of security, because you can only confine yourself to your home if you have a home. You can only have social distance if you have enough space to enjoy it. If we are to say, once we were slaves, but now we are free, then we have to mean it. We need to commit to make sure that each of us is able to have a Passover. Each of us is able to be safe and secure in this moment. That it is not merely play-acting liberation, but that we are each of us contributing to making a more free, just, and equitable world. If we are to say, I too left Egypt, that is commitment, not just a statement, a promise that every one of us can say that as well and truly mean it. The Alter Rebbe, in the next siman of his law code, writes that even a passing impoverished person, while not entitled to Ma'ot Chitin in full, still must be given at least matzah to eat so that he can fulfill the mitzvah. Fascinatingly, the Alter Rebbe says that this particular Pesach iteration is a variant on the general universal right of each poor person to their daily bread. Let me say that again. To the Alter Rebbe, Pesach's commitment to freedom is a particular example of the universal general right of all people to have food. If we are learning anything from the coronavirus now, hopefully we are learning the same message, that no one should be put in a position in which they are left to their wits' end if they are in a situation of crisis like we are. We need to ensure that people's basic needs are taken care of. The rabbis we have studied today have so far shown us that the Exodus is more than just a historical event, that it is an existential, spiritual experience we commit ourselves to year after year, actualizing freedom in our lives. However, we cannot make the mistake of reducing Judaism to mere internal experience, losing sight of the world in which we live, of the society we must create. The experience of freedom is the catalyst we need to motivate us to commit ourselves to a world in which each and every person has the necessary conditions to be able to have that freedom as well. Then we will have the world that God has promised us, one that moves from suffering to joy, from mourning to celebration, and from slavery and confinement to freedom. Shabbat Shalom, and Chag Kasher v'Sameach.